It's an honor for me to have a former Army commander, Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, with me on the podcast today.
What is Amrit Kaal? It is this period over the next 3 decades where you must work hard to get your house in order so that you grow rich before you grow old.
Why it takes for us so long to do as basic ground activity as fencing the borders?
People say Israel has got massive national security challenges. May I suggest to you, we have got even grimmer national security challenges, even more than Israel.
Why our procurement processes are so long?
The Bangladesh inventory is 70 to 80% Chinese.
In a way, the Pakistani army is a mujahideen for them.
Absolutely.
Who has to come forward? Is it the industry? Is it the military? Or is it the PMO?
USA spends $975 billion on R&D in science. $700 billion come from the private sector. 700. यहाँ आप किसी प्राइवेट सेक्टर वाले से पूछो बोलेगा सरकार. We are in the state that the Americans were in eagle claw.
Are you saying that we are 40 years behind the US military? Why can't we just go for a technology in our aircrafts which decides to go give us a source?
The technology, the equipment which travels to the soldier, sailor, airman in the field is not the best.
As a soldier, if I give you a toy or if I give you an ammunition, how long does it take to test?
When Deng says in 1980 that so what if the Middle East is oil? We have rare earths. He's galvanizing the nation to fine-tune, master its processing capacities.
What is the fundamental issue with us in China? What as countrymen we should be prepared for and develop ourselves for the next 20 years and 25 years?
Except Bharat is very much in your grasp, but it's not a done deal.
What is the strategic relevance of us having?
So America doesn't have 7 days of missiles and munitions for a fight in Taiwan. China can make 10,000 cruise missiles a week.
What is again our fundamental issues with Myanmar or with Nepal or with Bangladesh?
2003 to 2007, in all these emerging critical technologies, USA was the lone superpower. In 60 out of 65 technologies, it was number one. There was no close second. 2019 to 2023, China leads in 57 out of 65. 60-65 USA, 57-65 China.
Jai Hind, friends, welcome back to Revelations with Manasi. It's an honor for me to have a former Army commander, Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, with me on the podcast today. Thank you very much, sir, for coming in.
Thank you, Manas, and thank you for calling me, and all the best for your podcast, Revelations with Manas Ji. That's what it's called?
Absolutely, sir.
What are we going to reveal today?
So, sir, just a brief intro, if I may be allowed. General Raj Shukla has been a former Army commander. He has served 40 plus years in the Indian Army. He has been through the thick and thin of operations. He has seen a lot of strategic initiatives, right, implemented them. So we're going to talk about the strategy around Indian subcontinent, about our neighborhood, about our Indian armed forces, the problems that have been plaguing India for some time. What is a real bone of contention between us and our neighbors who don't look at in a very friendly manner with us? That is something that we are going to understand from General Shukla, from his ground experience and from his knowledge. So that's something that I would request you to reveal.
Yeah.
So just coming to start with, from a strategic culture point of view, right? I've seen your previous podcast and interviews. You've spoken about strategic culture, and you have referred to Shakti of Ma Durga, Saraswati, right, and Ma Lakshmi. And you're talking about convergence of the traits of all these three goddesses, right? Now, if you were to write a strategic DNA from scratch, what three pillars we must embed across civilian, political, and military minds, keeping this statement of yours, and if you could elaborate a bit more on this.
So, you know how I got to it. Indian culture is very rich. Say, the house I grew up in, it was never rigid. But there were a lot of hand-me-down stories. My father used to tell me what happened in the village. My mother would tell me what would happen in the town she came from, Lakhimpur. And one of the things, I have no source to it, but either my father or my mother used to speak of this. Lakshmi or Saraswati Lakshmi Durga ka Mishran. What it meant was how we must respect Lakshmi, which is education, university systems, and so on and so forth. The whole education ecosphere, why it is so important. And they would also say why we must respect Lakshmi, wealth creation. It is to be respected, not looked down upon. And also instruments of force, Durga and all that. So it was just a thought at the back of my mind. It was no rigid doctrine. Later on, I saw two things. When I was growing up in the military, we had this whole culture of civil military control. Relationship mein kya tha? Civil control of the military. It was a big thing. For a while, it did make sense, because in the initial years when there were coups all around in Pakistan, so on, so there was this need to keep the military in place. So the civilian control was extremely important.
Right.
And I happened to write a paper on this business when I was a colonel, and I delved into the origins of this concept. So there were people, we don't have this tradition here. There is a tradition in the US where you have these whole CMR analysts. It's a lifetime profession. So Peter Fever, I was talking of Peter Fever. He's one of their top minds in CMR. He says that he's referring to the fundamentals of the civil-military relationship. And he says the civilian has a right to be wrong. Just let it sink in. The civilian is right even when he's wrong. And he's referring to the political principle. So, in the context of the military leadership, so the military is bound to follow the civilian even when he's wrong. He has a right to be wrong. If you have great differences, the only honorable way out is to resign. But you cannot push back against the order unduly. You can make your views known, you can, push back a little, but not unduly. That is the principle of civil military relations. Having said that, in Western democracies, once the relationship settled down, I mean, today in USA there is no fear of a coup. Then it grew in very productive ways. So I think in India too, that time has come. Now it's a very professional military, but totally under political control. So that was one part of it. Then, I just happened to study what the Chinese are doing. They call it military civil fusion. Just the opposite, military civil fusion. So no separation, fuse. And military civil fusion, I'm now writing a book on the subject, is as profound as that. The drivers of military civil fusion are, as Z says, why put walls of granite between cylinders of excellence? Look at that. It's an entirely different thought process.
Can you just repeat that once again?
Why build walls of granite between cylinders of excellence? So civil military are cylinders of excellence. Why keep them apart? The West says dual use, deny it. A civil technology will not go into the military field. They say, no, why? And it is my assertion that if China is beating most Western democracies, including India, it is because of military civil fusion. And that set me thinking that my dad said the same thing. He said, Durga Lakshmi, Saraswati Lakshmi Durga ka Mishran. Fuse them, don't keep them apart. So I began to conclude that our civilization says fuse them, maximize their outputs. Post 47 Western thought said keep them apart. China is fusing them, so why not fuse them? Now that the relationship has settled down, there is no fear of doing a coup now. I mean, no Indian general will be as idiotic to even think of a coup. So once the relationship has stabilized, has the time come to make it more productive through convergence? So Saraswati, Lakshmi, Durga ka Mishran, for example. So what does it mean? Have the best universities, get Nalanda back, get Allahabad, which was the Oxford of the East, back. That whole thinking, ideation, tradition. And once you get that back, these universities will produce talent. And these universities will produce this talent, will produce technology. Use this to grow Lakshmi, wealth creation. And then use some of that Lakshmi to nurse your instruments of power. So civil military fusion. but perhaps predicated on an old civilizational idea. Now, if you tell me who said it, when, source it, I can't. These are hand-me-downs of the Indian cultural tradition. But to
Right.
me, in practical ways, it makes much sense. So I'm saying today we are at a time, the Chinese have grown their ship industry on the back of MCF, the chip industry on the back of MCF, military civil fusion. 2017, Z forms a commission which he personally heads. It's called military civil fusion. So why not in our case? The time has now come. For example, let me give you just one example. In the whole world of emerging technologies, all these technologies lie at the cusp of civil military fusion. AI can be used for the next drug to be discovered. It can be used in health. It can be used in business. It can be used in national security and defense. So why separate the technologies? In fact, if you see the Chinese, their philosophy is exactly the opposite. They say in AI, perhaps for reasons of domestic surveillance and all, they say in the civil space, exercise overweening control. But in the national security space, freewheeling, no control. Precisely the opposite. In our case, we are likely to do something very different. कि civil में खुला रखो, military में control करो, which runs against this wisdom of Saraswati Lakshmi Durga Commission. So it is in that sense I have made this point, and I kind of wish to popularize this concept to say that.
Well, so I don't know who said it, but then for me, the source has been used, and that's why.
And I've told you I have no source.
So
It's just a hand me down.
and that was the reason.
I wish my father was alive. I could have asked him, "Give out
No, so let's. So thank you, wherever he is, smiling and hale and hearty, for giving this thought, because this was something which really struck me, and yeah, because if you look at it, they all three are intertwined. We can't, it's like one leads to other. We can't say that we are okay to be educated and not to be rich, and we're okay to be educated and rich but not be powerful, right? Especially the kind of neighborhood that we have, especially where we are.
And also see unnecessary silos. Somebody said, think like a man of action, act like a man of thought. Why create? I mean, all this business of kya kehte, thinking general. It's an oxymoron. What general if you can't think? What is this nonsense? Soldier, scholar. You have to have all traits. Arjun was very good with the bow and arrow. He's also sharp in the head.
But so now that's a great thought, and with due respect, how do we bring it to implementation? Because it takes some while to comprehend those thoughts. Now, if I may, I just ask you, a certain bulleted program for India to be in a time bound manner, and you may want to share the timeline as also, for us to be becoming a power, to become a power that nobody dares to messes with, you know, and the steps that you would want to propose.
So see, when today we talk of Amrit Kaal and Viksit Bharat, it's a smart way of setting deadlines and pushing us to perform in accelerated ways. So my understanding of the concept is what? What is Amrit Kaal? It is this period over the next 3 decades where you must work hard to get your house in order so that you grow rich before you grow old. Because our demographics, the favorable demographics, are not going to last forever.
So before the demographic dividend becomes a demographic liability.
So this is the spirit. It also happens to coincide with a kind of maturation of India as a nation, as a democracy. We have got over our initial problems. I mean, we are not in too happy a space. We still have challenges of equity, so on and so forth. But largely, we have reached the takeoff point. We are not what we were in the 60s and 70s. There were periods of grim challenges. So, may I say that the worst is behind us? There is now a huge opportunity, but it's not done. It's not a done deal. You have to get your act together in terms of technologies, in terms of accelerating the economy, in terms of creating a right business environment, also in terms of securing your rise. This rise could be inevitable, but there are challenges, as Sindoor has demonstrated. So I'm saying that India, there was a thought some years back that the way for India to rise is to secure its external periphery to make sure that internally the environment is benign so that you can grow. May I suggest that's not happening? India will have to plot its rise amidst multiple crisis, conflicts, and confrontations. Sindoor was the beginning. You will not have this period कि भाई सब इत्मीनान होगा और आप economy पे focus करें और grow करें.
That will never happen, right?
I don't think so. So as you grow, you will have to set aside resources to secure yourself. So we must grow in Amrit Kaal, and we must of course have economic, technological dreams, but also keep periodically setting aside some resources to secure that rise. So that's my kind of thesis.
So if I come to very ground reality on that, if I'm not wrong, 2001 was a time around when we had, the LOC getting fenced. I'm not sure what is the status on the eastern borders right now. So on one side, you're saying that we should be securing and so on. Then why it takes for us so long to secure, to do as basic ground activity as fencing the borders? Be it with any of our neighbors. I mean, I'm with no disrespect or hostility towards anyone, but then it's my house, it's my house. What stops us from demarcating our borders very clearly, even where there's no dispute?
So nothing at all, except for the thought and then getting that idea into practice, then executing it. For example, when the fence along the LOC came up, there were all debates within the army that if you fence it, soldiers will get complacent. You should never fence it.
Okay.
And soldiers.
This is within the army.
This was within the army. There were hot debates. What is the need of this? Is it worth spending so much? Because, but over a period of time, not only has that fence come up, it has done wonders. It has got technologically laced. So today it's just not a fence. It is a fence which has got HHTIs, it has got all kinds of surveillance equipment, it's got firing platforms. So it's a formidable obstacle. Yet, now you may say, yet Pahalgam happened. Some guys will always get through. Now, you're absolutely right. Today, it is my belief that there is a national security reality emerging along the eastern borders, Bangladesh.
Do we have fencing with them?
We don't. So we need to build fencing around those areas, and I think, money has now been sanctioned. So you're absolutely right. We should secure our borders not only from national security threats, but also from threats like immigration, the Rohingyas and all that. We look at what the churn that USA is going through today, because it's been lax on these issues, right? So why should we make that mistake? We should secure our borders. Immigration should be there, but it should be legal. So obviously these are challenges, huge challenges. And see, look at, let me just make one point. This thought crosses my mind. People say Israel has got massive national security challenges. May I suggest to you, we have got even grimmer national security challenges, even more than Israel. Look along your western horizons, it is not just Pakistan, it is Pakistan, China, and Turkey. You're fighting the might of three powers there. Along the north, you have, along the LAC, all the problems. They were as recent as Galwan. The military component of the power differential with China is $450 billion. Valor has its limits, so you have to find money, structural corrections, cultural corrections, technological innovation to bridge the gap. I've told you, on the east, I see new national security realities. Look what's happening in Bangladesh. The rise of the Islamists. The ISI chief has been there, 3 visits over the last 2 months. There you have Pakistan, Bangladesh, and China. The Bangladesh inventory is 70 to 80% Chinese. Why is China seeking access to the Bay of Bengal? Lal Monerhat Air Base.
Lal Monerhat Air Base has been activated.
So we have to look at these very proactively. And then there is that whole problem in the seas. So for the Chinese 400-ship navy is not going to patrol the coastlines. It's already here. It's going to come in greater numbers. So we have to seriously invest in national security resources. And let me also say that national security is a force for public good. National security is becoming synonymous with economic prosperity. One will not happen without the other. So we have to look at our defense budget. Is it time to raise the defense budget? Defense spending.
Defense budgets are according to you?
See, before we come to what should it be, we should first settle this issue that do we need to spend on defense? That is also a big issue here and a legitimate issue. because people say the resource pool is the same. If you spend on defense, what happens to development? Now, here is the question. Last month, Times of India, there were two young economists. One is Aditya Kulavari or something. Let's call him on your podcast. He quotes a piece in the American Economic Review, which is, I'm told, a very reputed journal, which concludes that defense spending is productive. It makes your economy productive. He says if you spend 1 rupee of your GDP on defense, this expenditure adds 1 rupee to your GDP. Look at that. It says it has a fiscal multiplier of nearly 2, which means defense is not unproductive. The years that I grew up in, we were told defense is non-productive.
It's a white elephant.
It's not true. The base fundamental
That's what
premise,
was right.
premise is not true. China has primed its economy in various phases through defense expenditure. When the Americans talk of $175 billion on the Golden Dome, they also talk of jobs coming to this place and that place and this place, industry. So the military-industrial complex, it has got a bad name, but it is not as evil as people make it out to be. It's got economic prospects. It creates jobs. So I suspect that we can afford to spend more on defense. So we need to revisit the metrics of our economic statecraft, basically. How much? Why should we spend on defense? Now people will say, is it to war fight? I say no, it is just to create deterrence. Deterrence is, of course, costly, but wars are costlier. Don't believe me? Ask the Ukrainians. So these are deep intellectual arguments. You'll have to wrestle with them and then decide, should it be 1 point? It took a Trump, and everybody in Europe is now agreed 5% GDP. Just a tough guy called Trump. What was it yesterday? The NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte or something is paying tribute to Trump. That thanks to you, sir, Europe has started spending. Where was this wisdom of Europe before that? So one guy can come and make you spend, which means you could always spend. You knew that you should spend. You were not spending. So in a very mature manner, thoughtful manner, we have to tackle these questions. National security is the first charge of the state. Take your mind back to 7th to 10th May when things were hotting up here or had hotted up. I mean, could you have made any excuse that we couldn't find the money and this and that? So these are matters of life and death. They have to be given very serious thought.
So in fact, so you made a very relevant point and something that I did not think it like that. Because not that defense expenditure, if channelized properly and creating a military infrastructure complex, it definitely adds to the economy. Not only that,
These defense corridors
defense corridors.
in Lucknow and Chennai, will they not create jobs?
Absolutely. I mean, all the
So you can have a company doing software, very good. You can have a company doing military stuff. They create jobs. They give you security. How is it non-productive? And I don't have an economic background to drive it, but there is Aditya Kulavari. There is the American Economic Review. वो तो economists कह रहे हैं.
And not only that, sir, it will also save your economic assets right now. I mean, that is
It will secure them. Let's get back to the larger point. You have to secure India's rise. You can't hope that it will be secured. And that's not the reality. If I'm sitting in Beijing, what am I doing? I'm creating trouble for India. I'm complicating its rise. So I will make sure that Pakistan is a constant irritant. I mean, I give them J-10s, J-17s. They fight on my behalf. Why should I fight?
So they are in a way, the Pakistani army is a mujahideen for them.
Absolutely. And why leave it at that? Create trouble in Bangladesh now. So create trouble on both your flanks. And if I'm in Beijing, I'll do that.
And I do my business and let India be busy with the...
Yeah, exactly. And I look at other things. And if I see weaknesses here, then I do Gulwan also. So therefore, these are challenges. I cannot think of any logic which tells us that you can neglect them. But yes, there is that other part. How much do you spend in a prudent manner? So it has to be. And there also it's just not additional expenditure. There are internal inefficiencies in the system which have to be removed. So we have to downsize, right size, get the technology piece right, get innovation right. Look at innovation. Ukraine is a country without a navy. It's a country without an air force. With innovation, they have kept Russia at bay for 3 years. A country without a navy has used cruise drones and Starlinks to target the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol. Unbelievable. It doesn't have an air force. 3 F-16s from the west which don't fly. And drones have kept them in place. 80% of Russian casualties in men and equipment have come not from infantry, not from armor, not from artillery, not from air power, but drones. Innovation. So it's just not money. It is a comprehensive national security makeover in thought, ideation, execution.
So, who should be owning this complete execution in terms of thought, ideation, convergence of the three quarters, implementing that on the ground? Is it who has to come forward? Is it the industry? Is it the military? Or is it the PMO?
Everybody.
How it has to be driven?
Everybody. So let's take the private sector first. USA spends $975 billion on R&D in science. $700 billion come from the private sector. 700. यहाँ आप किसी प्राइवेट सेक्टर वाले से पूछो, बोलेगा सरकार. अरे आप क्या कर रहे हैं? National security also concerns you. Think tanks in USA which drive ideation are funded by the private sector. Here, somehow the private sector has assumed that national security is just the charge of the government. No, it concerns everyone. It will affect their industries, it will affect their power plants, it will affect their software hubs. The security of Bangalore is, of course, primarily the responsibility of the government and the Air Force. It should also bother the software giants over there. They have to secure it. So, R&D by providing technology. Military, of course, it is the primary charge. There are government mates, the Ministry of Defense, the NSCS. Everybody has to get their act together. And you have to be quick off the block. Look at AI. People say that the next 5 years, the leadership in AI will be settled. He who gets to AI superintelligence first will rule the world. And the two true players are China and USA. India is not seriously in the game. So we have to step up our game in AI. We've just got the AI mission going. But where is our DeepSeek? Where is our QN? So all this stuff needs to happen faster. Look at ISR dominance. Israel, I'm told, since 2006 till 27th September 2024, when Nasrullah gets knocked out, every day they knew where Nasrullah was.
They knew.
They knew where he was. 27th November, the day they chose to strike. But knowing where he is every day is a huge effort. It's a national effort. It is Mossad, it is Unit 8-200, Unit 9-300. So, ye so capabilities, somebody, General Sundarji, very famously said that we must invest in capacities because capacities take decades to create. Intentions change overnight. So, ISR capacity will be built over 3 to 4 decades. I'll give you one example.
Yeah.
Give you another example of Ukraine. So it's a combination. Find the funding, do innovation, push it to its edge like offensive ISR. In India, we say we have got satellites. That's not good enough. Those satellites have to be so maneuvered, meshed with intelligence, technological agencies like 8-200, 9-300. Then you will get this dominance, ISR dominance. ISR dominance means I know where Nasrullah is every night. The day I strike is a different matter. That's a choice. So
It's a choice I make. But I have the complete info
yes,
to act as and when I want to act.
बिल्कुल. तो ये सब जो चीजें हैं, they're extremely important.
So
National security is a whole of nation enterprise. The military has a large part, but you need a military industrial complex. Let me give you one example. 2002, China the civilian capacities in manufacturing, not military, civilian capacities in manufacturing were half of those of USA. By 2022, civilian manufacturing capacities become twice of that of USA. In consequence, the Chinese military industrial complex today is 5 to 6 times more powerful than USA on American admission. So, America doesn't have 7 days of missiles and munitions for a fight in Taiwan. China can make 10,000 cruise missiles a week. How critical it is?
A week?
A week capacity. Whether they do it or not, 10,000. At one place I have read 7,000, one place I have read 10,000. Chalo, aap 5,000 le
So you're talking about cruise missiles.
Cruise missiles a week. These are the capacities they have created. Just look how critical it was in the Israel-Iran feud. The whole point was that Iran had 3,000 missiles and Israel was running out of arrow interceptors. The numbers matter. Military industrial complex matters. But it will not happen. The military complex will not happen on the back of a hollow civilian capacity. अब इसमें दो arguments हैं. One is that no, we have single service proficiencies. So let the Air Force grow to its prime, Air Force Army grow to its prime, Navy to its prime, and coordinate when required. So if it works, I have no problem. But what are the lessons of history? That unless you integrate, you will not have lethality and operational readiness needed to win. So what does it mean? See, since Iran is topical, let's take an example.
Right, sir.
April 1980, 52 American hostages are taken captive by the newly minted Iranian Revolution in Tehran, embassy mein hua. So the Americans, even then it was the largest military, most powerful military in the world. It launches an operation called Eagle Claw. The American military then is in the same state as the Indian military is today. So they have a permanent chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, like we have a Chief of Defense Staff. So single point advice is available to the government. But the structures to implement that advice are not. They don't have theaters. CENTCOM has not been created. You heard of CENTCOM today? CENTCOM, IPACOM, these are all American combatant commands all over the world. They have not been created. So what do? They assemble a task force. A task force under a major general. It has an army component and an air force component. They rehearse for 6 months, that whole task of how the forces will reach Iran, how they will move from sea to land, how the special forces will RV in a mountain and then launch the assault. A wonderful plan on paper, greatly rehearsed, American military power. But they are not integrated. So the fights are so petty कि भाई अगर ओशन से लैंड तक जाएगा जहाज तो हेलीकॉप्टर कैप्टन कौन करेगा? नेवल वाला, क्योंकि वो ओशन से उड़ रहा है, या आर्मी वाला, क्योंकि वो लैंड वहाँ कर रहा है. These are those silos, those cylinders of excellence, but separated by walls of granite. मैं करूँगा, Air Force, that whole culture, because it's lack of integration. So what happens? Out of the 8 helicopters, only 5 reach. Usme bhi one helicopter bangs into a C-130. 8 US servicemen sitting in that C-130 are blown up. C-130 is blown up. The helicopter is blown up. वो जो 5 helicopters, the mission has to be aborted, and the 5 helicopters are captured by the Iranians. So a most embarrassing military operation. It has to be aborted. Eagle Claw. The president of the time, Carter, loses the election because of the failure of Eagle Claw. So it's a military reverse, it's a strategic embarrassment, and it's a political disaster. Uske baad wahan pe they start. Barry Goldwater Nichols, theater commands, integration. So by Gulf War I, now you have the military, US military talking of network-centric warfare. And they are shock and awe. Then by Gulf War II, and tank commander can call for the fire of an F-16 directly. Integration, productivity, and the whole professional military education system is overhauled. They don't talk of Air Force, Navy, they talk of a joint war fighting spirit. So it peaks now. What did you see? What is this called? Operation Hammer, Midnight Hammer. Look at that. It is coordination not between Army, Navy, Air Force, but 4 or 5 joint structures. So STRATCOM, Transportation Command, Space Command, Space has got people from all three wings. The Stratcom, the boss is from the Air Force, number two is from the Navy. But they are integrated structures. And now you have these military wonders, 18-hour flight, multiple refueling. Refueling is a very complex task. A refueler from Transportation Command, the B2 from Strategic
Right,
Command.
sir.
All that is happening. It would not have happened if you did not have space capacities. So it is this whole culture of integration, structural corrections. You have Eagle Claw and you have Midnight Hammer, and I told you how it evolved. Now we are in the state that the Americans were in Eagle Claw. We have to evolve from that. CDS DMA was a great beginning, but the process has since stalled. So theaterization is an instrument of the larger issue of jointness integration. Now you'll find two, three views on this. One is my view. I'm a whole hog integration. There are others who say no. Now, these debates have to be settled. Sindoor reinforced air power. It reinforced the importance of AD, but not in isolated silos, as part of
The joint
theatre
operation, the
capacity.
theatre
So there should
capacity.
be a Western theatre commander, could be from the Air Force. He will leverage the air assets. He will leverage a strike corps of the army.
Right.
Integrated effect. The Eastern Theatre Commander will look not only at the LAC, he will look at problems beyond. Burma, Myanmar, Bangladesh. It's a whole way you look at national security. It's a culture, structure, outlook. Theaterization is just one part of it.
So in that sense, are you saying that we are 40 years behind the US military?
We are in a similar state. Okay, you don't want the American example. Look at the Israeli example. Then Mossad is traditional int, but 8200, 9300, they are units which have very young people. They pick young people from colleges who know this whole business of AI, digitization, software, cyber. They give you the capacities what you got with that pager business. It is Mossad and this kind. So I'm saying it is integration of every kind. The Ministry of Defense today should be cross-pollinated. There should be civilians in the office of domain specialists in the office of the Raksha Mantri, the Chief of Defense Staff. Those days are gone of silos. They will be non-productive. You will get by, but you will not maximize national security effectiveness.
Is it not a high time so that, even in our procurement, we get away with this L1 business?
Absolutely. So procurement has to change. Firstly, see, it was never L1. It was always L1 T1.
Yeah, T1 was a
But
good
in
example.
practice, it has become L1. So you have to choose the most technically component and then see what the price is, L1. But generally, everybody passes the technology bar and it is settled on L1.
Because, sir, again, technology bar, thanks to certain guidelines, you can't, you have to give a fair chance, or you have to give a level playing field to almost everyone. And that is where you are making passing marks, and these are global giants. They will be able to qualify beyond a certain point. But your requirements being very spoke. I mean, look at the recent example. Why can't we just go for a technology in our aircrafts which decides to go give us a source code?
So the problem starts with what you said, level playing field. What does level playing field mean? So Eagle Claw, 1980 operation was level playing field. Sabko thoda, thoda, thoda. LCM, lowest common multiple. But in operations, you need highest common factor. When the two air forces face off, what will more matter? The best technology or the cheapest technology?
Of course, the best.
So there you are. So it is always L1 T1. In practice, it becomes L1. So we must set it right. Who must set it right? The IFAs. They are the best people in this business. They know the finance world. So IFA should say, no, my job is to ensure economy, but it is also to ensure maximization of operational outcomes. But in practice, he doesn't do that. He just goes by L1. So these are all degenerations. People talk of the GFR. I've read the GFR 100 times. It merely says,
So just for the benefit of audience,
the general financial regulations, it just says, don't waste government money. There should be no corruption. That's obvious. But it says that the best product must come. Now, those who interpret the
GFR.
GFR, don't do it in very helpful ways. So this is this whole,
So nowhere as per the GFR it says that you have to go with L1, take the
no,
cheapest technology.
no,
It is an interpretation issue.
it is an interpretation issue, absolute interpretation issue. And it has got so institutionalized that now you are saying L1 is a bugbear. What have, after many years, Hexeth has reversed all this. I'll give an example. So, Indocom, Eurocom, two commands have been given orders on AI. Who's got the orders? AI agents and Dural. LLMs, Microsoft. They're the best in the business. They don't come for L1, L1T1, the best in the business. So, that whole approach has to be changed. American military is overhauling its procurement. We are also taking some steps. All these issues are being addressed by and by. We are also going in for a separate innovation um, set of rules for procurement rules for innovation. See the kind of innovation which is taking place in Ukraine. Today you fire a drone on Friday and you see the way वो target पे लग नहीं रहा है. So your engineer tells you, sir, its motor has to be modified. You tell him, modify it. Who will modify it? Manas. Manas has the capacity, he will modify it. Over the weekend, you see what needs to be done and you print the parts through 3D printing on Monday morning. And the drone now is modified and it hits the target. Now, where is the scope for all this process you have, lengthy process of GSQR and this and that? So we have to change all this. Regulation has to adjust to the pace of innovation. And these are the challenges before us. And there are costs. Countries that do it will prevail, countries that don't, systems that don't, will pay the price.
So let me ask you on this, because you've seen military so well throughout your career. Why our procurement processes are so long? I mean, if you look at it, way back in 2012, the MMRCA tender was finalized. Rafale was declared L1, T1, and obviously no decision happened. Finally, we bought some 36 odd pieces, 34 being fighters, 2 being trainers. Uh, Later on, now that after all that decision has happened, evaluation of 2 years of runs have happened, then also the decision was not taken. So, is it that it's a very cumbersome process at the military level or at the bureaucratic level or at the political level that the decision takes so long?
See, it is what we have developed. All institutions have to grapple with two things. One is process and two is outcomes. So process is important. If I have to buy two cameras, there has to be a process. Otherwise, there will be arbitrary decisions. So process is important, but process can never be at the cost of outcomes. If the process leads to two inferior cameras, which spoils the quality of the podcast, what use is that process? So process is good, but it has to be defined by common sense. My experience has been that when we set up this DPP and all that, you know, we largely copied the American model. And I have been told by very, very senior people that no matter what you think, process will always triumph outcome. Look at this.
Process will always.
Triumph outcome. I have been told that, listen, militarily you may want outcome, but we prioritize process. So if you institutionally prioritize process, you will get process. Common sense. Why did you prioritize process? It lacks common sense. So then the thing doesn't work 4 years later. So now you modify it. But you know you have to modify it by 5x, but you just modify it by 2x. Again, it will fail. So the larger issue is that there has to be process, but that process cannot fail the test of common sense. And always process will need human discretion. Now, if I'm a careful soldier or a careful bureaucrat, I will always prioritize process. Ki yaar, mere ko kuch na ho. That is exactly what's happening. But there are consequences for this. The consequences is that the technology, the equipment which travels to the soldier, sailor, airman in the field is not the best.
And also, so there's a depletion of the squadrons. I mean, if I remember it right, that time we had 36 odd squadrons. Now we are down to almost 29 or 30.
Absolutely. So process, outcome, and common sense. That has to be the way out.
So on procurement, I wanted, as I was asking you, as a soldier, if I give you a toy or if I give you an ammunition, how long does it take to test it? Because my extension to this question is also that where exactly our procurement bottlenecks are, how are we comparing to the other countries in the world, how can we shorten it?
So you're absolutely right. See, procurement has got plagued by all kinds of problems. One was the sell one business. Two is these trials. I mean, a trial of a new system, if you ask me what is the realistic time, 3-4 months. But it's taking years. And now we have gone and taken these trials to ridiculous lengths. For example, the startups के जो products हैं, we are holding them to the same metrics as we are doing for a B2 bomber. It can't be. The startup is not designed to do all that. And see, it becomes increasingly complicated. When you place an order, say, before a good, powerful company, Tata or whoever, Adani, whoever, and you built all these issues, these bureaucracies into it. कि ये document लाइए, ये दिखाइए, trial ऐसे करिए. What does he do? He hires people to do all that and puts the cost into the product. The startup के पास पैसे ही नहीं है वो सब करने के.
वो तो मर जाएगा
So
सब.
how will he survive? Yeah. So once again, it is common sense. So if I am asked to do a trial, I will design a process which finishes in 4 months. अब उसको आप फालतू का यू वांट नहीं सियाचिन में भी कर लो, डेजर्ट में भी कर लो, असम में भी कर लो. These are all lack of common sense, fantastic measures. And this is exactly, that's the other part. Trials are taking far too long.
And they are.
And all this, and for this I hold the defense services even more responsible because you know it. This product, once it is cleared, is going to the soldier, sailor, airman in the field. You're denying him the product. So process has become the big problem. If I may say so metaphorically, we have to change from process to orders.
Outcome.
Orders. Startup को orders चाहिए क्योंकि he has to go to जो आप see in some of these very complicated technologies, semiconductors and all, startups are paying their engineers 5 crore per annum. उसको पैसे चाहिए. And there are other issues now. Debt is so expensive. The interest rates are so high. Where does the startup get the capital from? And VCs, unfortunately, just talk. They're very reluctant to. So it is linked to that whole. Overall, if you ask me, it is linked to that risk-taking ability. Sabki.
So can you highlight what our competition or adversaries have done very nicely on this procurement cycle and engaging or encouraging the startup companies to become more lethal on the ground, and what we should be learning from them?
So you see China is a very good example. China uses military civil fusion how? If you are a startup, your first order will come from defense. Okay? I will hold your hand till commercial viability. Hold your hand, defense orders. If you are particularly bright, I will hold your hand till we destroy adversary competition. जब तक मैं वो अमेरिकन कंपनी को तबाह ना कर दूं, मैं तुम्हारा हाथ पकड़ूंगा. It has to become strategic.
That is the level of commitment to government.
Not L1. Not government. Just what is this government business? Government is me and you, all of us. तो अगर हम नहीं सुधरेंगे तो government क्या करेगी? Government is driven by individuals. So the chap who's doing the trial, the guy who's processing the file in MOD, he has to have the strategic sense कि ये equipment चाहिए चाइना को beat करने के लिए. And not कि भाई ऐसा process कर दो कि भाई equipment ही देर से आए और ये आए. So we have to get smart in our thinking. And this is exactly what people are doing. In the ultimate analysis, let me make a larger point. What is civil military fusion? If you go back to the heydays of American defense, Chrysler was a company which made cars.
Yeah.
It also made satellites.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yes. You read this paper by Defense Reformation, it is called, by Shyam Shankar. He'll give you these traditions. In China today, only 17% of defense or the defense primes in China get only 17 to 18% of their orders from the PLA. Once they mature, they find orders from the commercial space. Only then they can be viable. So a company which is making cars is also doing this. this stuff and see how they have pushed technology to a new high. I'm told Xiaomi produces an electric vehicle through AI enabled factories, one electric vehicle every 76 seconds. Can you imagine this? Now you can dismiss these statistics. People are no, China की बात मत करो, we are not China. ठीक है, फिर आप जो हो उसके साथ रहो. But he's your neighbor, he's your competitor. Look what things can be done. 2003 to 2007, in all these emerging critical technologies, USA was the lone superpower. In 60 out of 65 technologies, it was number one. There was no close second. फिर China ने किया 1000 talents plan, diaspora strategy, all this smart stuff. 2019 to 2023, China leads in 57 out of 65. 60, 65 USA, 57, 65 China. Look at the dramatic technology inversion.
60 out of 65 that time were US.
USA.
And now 57
out of 65
You're
China.
talking about key strategic technologies.
Emerging critical. There's Australian strategic policy tracker. See it. Dramatic inversion in technology leadership. लोग कहते हैं नहीं हो सकता. क्यों नहीं हो सकता? अच्छा मैं आपको tell you the good news after the bad news. In 10 out of these technologies, India is number 2, number 3, some number 1. Can we not pick 10 technologies and say 10 saal mein we will be the world leaders in this? So when people say na China is a democracy, that is autocracy, tabhi wo kar sakte hain, it's not true. It is ideation, execution, all comes together. We were talking offline when Deng says in 1980 that so what if the Middle East has oil? We have rare earths. He's galvanizing the nation to fine-tune, master its processing capacities. और अभी आप देख रहे हैं क्या हो रहा है. So there are ways if we want to do it. अब हर चीज़ का हम बहाना मार देंगे कि नहीं L1 ही करना है, ट्रायल ही 4 साल होने हैं. तो फिर as you sow, so shall you reap.
So, because we've been talking about them, I'll go neighbor by neighbor and pardon my naivety on that. What is the fundamental issue with us and China? Because if I go back to history and if my memory goes right, everything was fairly okay till 1962 or till 1947. It was only then when China decided that no, we don't recognize the McMahon line. But if you go through the medieval period, वहाँ से पढ़ने लोग आते थे, Fayan came and we had exchange of thoughts and there was no ideological dispute. So what is the entire uh, what is a crux reason, fundamental reason that there's a fight about what are they looking for?
So you're right. This is a very complex question. Somebody told me that from the year 1 to 1800 of recorded history, 1 to 1800, China and India were the leading civilizations, leading
Silk Road,
economies, and we lived in peace. So we were leading the world and we lived in peace. Then they had their period of humiliation.
Correct.
And we had the British coming in, or before that, a whole set of colonial powers. So we were under colonial subjugation. He was under this century of humiliation. Generally, in the same time frame, both of us climb out of our respective miseries. So we become 47, we become independent. 49 or so, I think the Chinese Communist Party is formed. वहाँ से problem शुरू होती है. Initially, the Prime Minister Nehru and we were talking about Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai and all that. It is said of Prime Minister Nehru that he was very fond of visiting the hills. And he would dream, that Chinese trade, Indian trade will grow, we'll meet, and we'll become this. Together, Asia will rise. Right? It was not a bad dream. But people say...
To be fair to him, he had a history, evidence from the history to support his thoughts.
To support that. And he was an historian. He wrote Discovery of India from the precincts of a jail without access to a library. But critics say that he forgot that it is through these valleys that armies also march. So that dream of trade was stymied by these marching armies. And it happened in 62. 62, per capita GDP, Indians were higher than the Chinese. Net GDP was roughly the same. But we neglected defense. Perhaps he didn't neglect it so much. That led to an economic setback. So there are two theories. One theory will tell you that India and China have lived in peace for centuries. 62 was an aberration. My understanding tells me that post 47, China has decided that it is one tiger on a hill. It is either India or China. They talk of a multipolar world, but they refer to a unipolar Asia. We aspire for a multipolar world and a multipolar Asia. That's the fundamental contradiction. For the first time in history, you have two powers, number one and number three in terms of PPP, growing in close proximity. No Himalayas because they have been breached by technology, and no buffer Tibet. The only way to keep these rice peaceful is through deterrence. You can do it through hope or through deterrence. If you do it to hope, you will have problems like we had in 62 Galwan. If you do it to deterrence, China will back off. Now, you and your viewers can choose to believe one of the theories. One is right, one is wrong. One says that we lived in peace, 62 was an aberration. And the other will say, like I do, that post 47, there doesn't seem to be an indication of that. China has decided it's going to be one tiger on a hill. We are saying, let there be two tigers on either slope. वो कहते नहीं, चोटी पे एक टाइगर होगा. So that's the fundamental issue to be resolved.
So I beg to, perhaps differ,
Certainly.
or maybe I've not understood.
Or maybe you're from the first school of thought.
No, I don't think 62 was an aberration, because then the corresponding events wouldn't have happened.
Not only 62, I'll tell you other things.
Yeah.
Before Galwan, many and very fine diplomats, I respect those diplomats with fine minds, they said, China is not bothered about you. Go to Taiwan. His primary orientation is Taiwan. ये भी बोला गया. And they said, General Saab, इतने agreements हैं, peace and tranquility, ये वो, agreements are not violated like that. They don't get violated. You don't understand the diplomatic space. What happened? So since then, I have been a pessimist on China. The agreements can be violated. His primary orientation is not Taiwan. He's as bothered about India.
But sir, again, I'm still not able to find a fundamental reason for them to be hostile towards us, because we are a bigger market. I mean, is it not like somewhere some two minds have really messed it up in terms of not understanding each other? Because if everything was fine till 18th century or 19th century, right, and post 1949 things have changed, here is a neighbor of ours who has little or no value in front of the economic might that India is, or the market is India is. I mean, look at the CPEC corridor. It's going all the way from the top. It makes logical sense. Let's keep the sovereignty or that issue to be aside. But if everything was fine between India and China, a friendly corridor between the two nations would have been a far better made economic sense. Why a country like China, which is also focusing on its economic development, is not keeping a bigger market like India happy, but bothered about a nation with a begging bowl? That's something I fail to understand.
So if I go along with your worldview, let me simplify it further. So if I'm sitting in Beijing today, I know my primary competition is with USA. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
It could be in Taiwan, it could be in technology. My primary concern is the USA.
Yes, sir.
But so if my primary concern is USA, I should be friends with India. Logical.
True.
भाई इनसे दोस्ती करो और
Correct.
इनके साथ वो करो. But for some strange reason, those that matter in China take this view कि ये जो है ना, ये USA के बड़े करीब जा रहा है.
The history doesn't support that.
No, I mean, history may not support that, but their fear is when you talk of Quad, their tentacles rise. That is the unsaid part of it. So to keep him from going close to USA, keep him on the defensive, keep fingering him once in a while. And if I have to keep India off balance, पाकिस्तान से बढ़िया कोई दोस्त ही नहीं, वो सब कुछ करने को तैयार है. तो मैं उसको J10 दे देता हूँ, J17 दे देता हूँ, अब HQ19 दे दूंगा, J35 दे दूंगा. He'll keep you imbalanced.
So are you saying it is an unestablished and unfound insecurity for no rhyme or reason?
You may call it anything, it's the reality. The point is, why is it the reality? Why has he settled borders with so many countries and not settled with us? The McMahon line, on the same metric, he has settled the border with Myanmar. With us, he doesn't do it. Why does he talk of multipolar world but unipolar Asia? One tiger on a hill.
So we don't have an answer that what is the fundamental issue between us and China, or it's just a plain ego issue. It's 1948.
It's not ego. It's what you decide to embrace. He has decided to embrace. You can extend the argument anywhere. Pakistan. अरे आप अलग हो गए. You have got a country. India is absolutely not expansionist. हम तो कुछ करना भी नहीं चाह रहे हैं. I should live in peace with India.
So with
But हम
Pakistan,
बहाना ढूंढ लेते हैं. अच्छा, आप कश्मीर की बात करेंगे. Do the sane people in Kashmir, in Pakistan, don't know that you will never get Kashmir by force? Will you get it with a country as powerful as India? But नहीं. There is a ambition. चलिए हम इनको कुछ करेंगे और चाइना के साथ हम ले लेंगे. हम लेके दिखाइए. When sane minds in Pakistan say, भाई Pahalgam was a false flag operation. How do you wrestle with these minds? कि भाई हमने करवाया वो, हमने मरवाए लोग. फॉल्स फ्लैग ऑपरेशन.
हमने ही अटैक करवाया अपने आप पे, और बाद में सर ऑपरेशन सिंदूर में भी हमने अपने अपने मिसाइल कराई. हमने गोल्डन टेम्पल पे अटैक करवाने की कोशिश की.
तो आप कहोगे it doesn't sound to logic. I agree with you, but there are such people on both sides, and that is why hostilities continue. Let's be fair to the Prime Minister. 18 times he met Xi in the hope that we will settle it. Even in the case of Pakistan, didn't he fly down
Yes.
to Nawaz Sharif? When Pathankot happened,
We
invited them to investigate. उन्होंने क्या जॉइंट इन्वेस्टिगेशन में क्या कहा
Clean sheet.
कि हम नहीं कराई. मतलब क्लीन चिट भी दे दो, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, हमने कराया. I mean, these are the realities of international relations. So, if you tell me why do they do it, I don't know, but they do it.
So with and again, I'll now come to Pakistan also, because with Pakistan, not maybe, but the fact is the genesis of Pakistan or the origin of Pakistan is on a two-nation theory. It is an ideological difference, right? I don't see that with China. So, I mean, I'm still able to find out, trying to find what is that is so bothersome between us and China. But anyway, if it is that it is only one tiger who's going to be sitting in Asia, or one dragon who's going to be sitting in Asia, if that's something that they want.
But see, now, so if you keep reasoning rationality out and go to the brutality of big power politics or power, everybody does it. What is the US's narrative? At least prior to Trump, he has changed it. So the US's narrative prior to Trump was that we will get talent from all over the world, use that talent to create wealth, use that wealth to create a global military, $950 billion, 850 bases, about 75 odd countries, 11 aircraft carriers. Why? Because when you dominate the world in this manner, you ensure economic prosperity, technological primacy, so the military complements the rest. And it is based on the premise of the freedom to roam the globe. So my military should be able to roam the globe, and I should not allow any regional challenger. So keep Russia in place, keep China in place. और अपनी हेमिस्फीयर में तो बिल्कुल, when America was rising, it was extremely brutal. It attacked Mexico, it attacked Canada, stabilized its periphery.
I remember reading about the policy of international policemanship, where it said the Britishers that, don't cross the Atlantic. This is our territory.
So what is the logic? Nothing but brute power politics. Even the Americans have followed it. In fact, today in America, there are 3 schools of foreign policy. One says, ki don't waste your resources in policing the world. Retreat to the Western Hemisphere. Sort out your problems, the border with Mexico.
There's enough on the plate. No?
Greenland and all that. Prosper karo, enjoy karo. Rebuild your military. When you rebuild, go to the world. There's another school of thought. This is the Vance school of thought. There is another school of thought by people like Elbridge Colby who say pull out of other theaters, go to China. That's where the problem is. China is the next challenger. It is beating you. Don't let Taiwan happen. Don't allow primacy in the Indo-Pacific. And there is a third school of thought which says no, you have to balance all theaters. There should be no rival in Middle East. Iran can never have a bomb. Checkmate Russia through Europe or NATO. And of course, don't allow the Chinese to grow. So there's the maximalist theory, there is the China pivot theory, and there is the restrainer, pullback theory. So now what is the rationale for that? It's brute power politics. One very rational thing could be कि भाई छोड़ो सब कुछ. You have enough money, focus, have a good time. But then that good time doesn't last because power intervenes. So you have to choose. I mean, look, see, India was very benign. India said, we want to have a stable external periphery, a benign internal periphery, और हम सिर्फ development चाहते हैं. But ये होने देंगे क्या ये? So there is a world of utopia and there's a world of reality.
So coming to Pakistan, you always say that, um, and there's always this noise or a thought in, which said, POK le lete hain. And we just spoke that, sane people out there are also wise enough to realize that they can't take Kashmir from us, right? So let's keep the emotional pride aside. And I don't want to be at the risk of being called anti-national. I love my country. And yes, we should have an Akhand Bharat. The question is, what is the strategic relevance of us having POK? Pure play from a military or from an economic standpoint.
So first, let me say this, that POK is just not a military obsession. It's backed by a parliamentary resolution. So it has got bipartisan support. All sides of the political spectrum are party to that resolution which said we'll get POK back one day. Now we have to see what are the resources you need to get POK. If it is brute attrition, you will need a whole lot of military resources. There are other ways to get POK back, a combination. Some you can't speak on public platforms how, but there are ways to get it back. And the third question is, some people argue that where do you need to invest your resources? Do you want to project power into POK or do you wish to project it across Malacca? Where is the bigger threat? So I would put it this way, that getting POK back is a parliamentary resolution. So that reflects national will and national resolve. And there are the military realities. How attritionist do you want to be? What combination of resources, what you need? And where is the greater threat? Is it across Malacca or is it POK? Now, these will be debated at relevant platforms and a decision will be taken. And the third thing is, it is a narrational question that you forget Kashmir, let's discuss POK. So it is complicated in that sense.
So I totally respect that parliamentary resolution and that sentiment behind it. But because you've been the man on ground, you've commanded troops over there. Say if today we decide to take POK, is it because it's important to cover heights? Is it because from a pure, military advantage that we want to capture those areas? Or is it that there's some oil reserve or something over there that we want to get that in our control? Outside the political narrative and outside the emotion of having it as a integral part of India, which I'm absolutely for, what is the relevance?
So there is no military narrative and political narrative in isolation. There is a politico-military narrative. So if there is a parliamentary resolution, which is bipartisan, which is to get POK, then the military could be an instrument to get that. Of course, the military will offer to the political class the pros and cons, the attrition that may encounter, the resources needed. It will be a discussion, just like it was in Sindoor. The politician and the military came to a common decision as to how the escalatory ladder will be leveraged. So I'm saying it is always politico-military. It was not politics apart and military apart. It is politico-military. And there is the other legitimate question. When he talks of Kashmir, we tell him, forget it. Let's talk of POK. That is the unsettled question. So I'm talking of a combination of of reality and prudence. It is not off the table because he doesn't put it off the table. So when you talk of Kashmir, I say POK, and that POK happens to be backed by parliamentary resolutions. This is the sagacity of the political class who have been elected. So that is the national will. Military is an instrument. It will offer pros and cons of doing it, and it will offer options. It will offer alternatives. But when you try to differentiate between a political necessity and a military reality, uh, that is quite unnecessary because that is not the way things happen. It is always politico-military.
So, because you spent a considerable part of your life there, you commanded troops. Does capture or retake of POK, apart from the political will and resolution, does it help us to make the life of our armed forces better? Because maybe we are on the other side of the hill, back in the valley. Right now, maybe we are on this side of the cliff. Does it bring our operational costs down? Is it just a matter of pride, or is it actually a strategic advantage, geo advantage that we have?
So, see, these are periodic debates. 2004, there was this whole issue of raised whether it was worth occupying Siachen Glacier any longer. I mean, the same questions got raised कि भाई इतना खर्चा हो रहा है, ट्रुप्स वहाँ पे हैं, कोई इकोनॉमिक बेनिफिट नहीं है. But the whole question militarily got resolved in this manner that people said, okay, we come down. Can you trust the Pakistanis? If they occupy it, what will be the cost of reoccupying Siachen? So they always cannot be answered in this manner. Economics of it. That's why I say it's political, military, economic. It's a host of reasons. Perhaps the economic arguments are not as enticing, but the arguments of sovereignty and the costs of retaking are far greater. So now, similarly, POK. So it, as I said, which is in what manner do you want to retake POK? If it is purely land driven, military attritionist, it will take a whole lot of resources. There will be costs. But what are the advantages? The advantages are you're taking territory. You will get access to mineral resources. There are pros and cons of every operation. There are smarter ways of doing it, which, as I said, cannot be spoken here. So there are options, and in any place, any situation, and see, this is the good thing. In fact, there's a book just being released, Alone in the Ring by General N.C. Vidge, where he points out the Siachen issue, where the politicians said what they want and the military gave them their advice. And a similar thing happened during Iraq war. There was a political component which had said we should send troops to Iraq, and the professional military advice was not. But this is the beauty of bureaucracy, that now in the Indian strategic military system, that you have a, a professional military under political control giving advice, but the political sagacity of accepting the advice. They can always reject it, and then the military has to salute and obey. But they accepted the advice. Now, similarly in POK, I've told you for the reasons that is it legitimate? Certainly, because he raises all these issues. Why not? So that's the way. Can we do it? We can. Should we do it? It's a matter of debate and a whole lot of reasons. When should we do it? Why should I tell you? Some things are never disclosed. So it is a combination of factors, and the good part of our system is, look at Sindoor. Um, the opposition and the proposition came together.
It was a beautiful unison.
So that's the way it should be on all national security issues. There has to be consensus, prudence, and a whole lot of things of that kind.
So, sir, shifting from Pakistan to other neighbors, we saw, I felt an uncomfortable silence from other neighbors, beat during the Operation Sindoor. What is again our fundamental issues with Myanmar or with Nepal or with Bangladesh? Because for sure it was not a vociferous or very vocal friendly support that we had. I may be wrong in my interpretation, but
So, see, when you dissect it, what was the international response? Everybody condemned the act of terror. By and large, everybody. So that there is no dispute. Nobody said that what Pakistan did is good. Everybody backed us on the right to defend ourselves. So nobody said that you don't do Operation Sindoor. Nobody said that. They backed us on the right to defend us. Let's take the Americans. Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, in his initial tweets, J.D. Vance said that we condemn the act of terror. India has the right to defend itself. The shortfall was in the third metric, when not very many people condemned Pakistan for sponsoring terror. That was the point. So it was not that it was, a whitewash. We did get diplomatic support, but in this manner. Having said that, our strategic communications could have been better. See, what happens is that if you don't communicate with agility and with speed, Pakistan brought up spun the narrative. And that narrative settled into some parts of the West. And that hardened so much that you had to send a parliamentary delegation then to. So the lesson is that you have to be agile with your narrative, quick with your narrative. In the military sense, we had these single service briefings. They were good, very professional. Next time, why not have a joint briefing? Have a DG Stratcom who has the ear of the CDS, who's in the know of things, and speaks on a day-to-day basis. So this is my response to it, that it was not a whitewash. It was qualified in the sense that I explained, but we can do better.
So considering our neighborhood, that everybody is, we are having problems somewhere or the other. What are the 5 steps that we should be taking for each of these countries? I don't know if balkanization of Pakistan is a possible thing to do, right? Or if that's the best way to do it, because whether you're creating 5 more problems or you are, kind of solving the bigger problem. And the same goes for Myanmar, and the same goes for Bangladesh. I mean, what is it that we can do to solve or to keep them at bay or keep them within their limits?
There are 3-4 things. Look at mighty China. I mean, it has settled its disputes with many people, but does it not have problems today with Philippines, with Japan, with South Korea, with the USA? So there are no benign neighborhoods anyway. China has a set of problems despite all its power. The USA is now having problems with Greenland, with Canada, with NATO, with Europe. There are problems with everyone. I'm not trying to justify but I'm just coming to this. So there'll never be an absolute benign. तो होगा नहीं. Now, what are the realities which we should address? The first question you asked of neighbors. See, I don't blame all neighbors. They see the power imbalance. So the first thing we have to do is to narrow the power gap with China, which we discussed in the first phase. Now, this is why all these things are very important. And this goes to your L1 and all that lazy stuff. These are the consequences. If you are, say, ex-neighbor, let's not even name him, I want to support you, but I see that he's getting more powerful. What do you do in the neighborhood? What do you do amongst humans? The same thing applies out there. So the first thing is to reduce the power imbalance with China. Uske liye who's to blame? We are to blame, nobody else. We have to get our act together. If you do it, many of these guys who are talking sweetly that side will talk sweetly this side. That is one part of it. The second part is, what should we do, say, with Pakistan? See, your economy is $4 trillion. Achha, before that, let me make one point. As long as we were nobody, we didn't have so many problems with our neighbors. But the moment you become somebody, jealousies will come, all that will come. People will have stuff. So we should become a little thick-skinned also. As long as we do the right thing, we shouldn't be bothered about what people think of us. So 1, 2, 3, it is my view. Now let's say Pakistan. You are $4 trillion. He's what? $0.38 trillion. His foreign exchange reserves are $7 billion. Yours is $700 billion. Oh, he makes much of that $1 billion loan from IMF. One industrialist in Bombay can raise it in 3 hours. Firstly, we have to come to grips with our heft. We are far too powerful. He is nowhere near us. The point is strategically in thinking, sometimes he punches 6 notches above his weight, we punch 10 notches below our weight. We should punch to our size. And the fourth thing is that some of this economic disparity must get converted to military might. So I talk of combat overmatch vis-a-vis Pakistan, which is entirely possible. Now, if you invest in offensive ISR, if you invest in these things, if he knows that next time it will not be the brother-in-laws of Masood Azhar, but Masood Azhar himself. If he knows it will be GOC Bahawalpur because he's doing all this terror stuff. If he knows that we have these capacities, will he mess with us? Possibly yes, possibly not.
The likelihood is obviously less
Less.
compared to what it is.
So the first question is create capacities, then last ask those questions. अगर capacities ही नहीं है, so we have the wherewithal, we are not translating it into precise military might. So as I have been saying for a while, Ops Sindoor underlined the utility of force. And if I may just spend a minute, so you go back to Parakram. I was a lieutenant colonel in Parakram. Parakram was worse. He hit the heart of your parliament. And when you were mobilized, he hit Kaluchak. 34 people died in Kaluchak. Could there have been a graver provocation? But what did we...
Families were attacked.
For various reasons, that narrative came of strategic restraint. Strategic restraint क्या था कि वो हमें मारेगा, हम कुछ करेंगे नहीं. And then we started building reasons why we could do nothing. We could do nothing. 26/11 के बाद तो हमने और भी कुछ नहीं किया.
तो पाकिस्तान ने chief took that time the proposition to attack.
तो पाकिस्तान ने कहा भाई बढ़िया देश है यार, इसको मारो, एक बार मारो, 2 बार मारो. ये कहता है strategic restraint. This time we showed it is offensive poise. We told you that your nuclear capacity is a bluff. We will hit your heart and you will do nothing, and that's what we did. इस बार हमने उसको कहाँ नहीं मारा बताओ. रावलपिंडी में मारा, रायविंड में मारा, उसको बहावलपुर में मारा, नूर खान में मारा. It was naked and exposed. He came running to us. And that is a fact. He went running to the west ki bacha lo, bacha lo, bacha lo. So when let's punch to our weight. We are capable of doing it. So that is the story with Pakistan. With China, you have to adopt a whole set of asymmetric measures, technological innovation, cultural changes, all that stuff. You can bridge it. And China is a rational player. If it knows that you're investing in deterrence, it will back off. But if you don't invest in deterrence, then he will also show you eyes. And if you can take care of Pakistan, but you also have to be long-term. I'm saying start looking at Bangladesh. It's a new national security reality. So, bhai, act. If we act, the number of questions that you have raised will half. If we don't act, they will multiply. So that is the whole.
I just hope we never have a podcast with such kind of questions and the questions keeps on reducing, because that's a good indicator of how we are progressing.
Yeah.
But
this whole national security debate must deepen. For a while, it was confined to Lieutenant's Delhi and to some very exclusive corridors. Now it must deepen on podcasts like this. You ask the questions, raise the questions, and those in authority must be persuaded to give answers.
So one last question I wanted to ask you now. Considering, I mean, I don't know whether we are in a scenario of World War III right now or not, but we have a neighborhood no deadlier, in fact, deadlier than what Israel has. What as countrymen we should be prepared for and develop ourselves for the next 20 years and 25 years?
So we should do everything to secure our rise, which means what? We must, of course, have a galloping economy. We should have all kinds of HR reforms. We should prioritize talent like what America does. And we should also invest in national security. See, the point is India has talent. The question we should ask is that why can we not use this talent to converge it into the wherewithal and capacities that other countries are doing? Let us just take out the excuses. What are the excuses we make? But China is an autocracy, so it's doing better. It's an autocracy, yes. It is also a meritocracy. It is also thinking ahead of you. So let's get to these honest questions. If we are a democracy, we should think better than them. We should innovate better than them. Why is China innovating better than us? All these. Then the next question is, why we are not USA? Okay, you're not USA. Be Indian. India एक समय सोने की चिड़िया थी, तो वो सोने की चिड़िया कर लो. बहाने बंद करो. And let me also tell you that in the last many years, a lot of good things are happening, but they need to accelerate. They need to grow in scale, pick up momentum. So my last point is that Vikasit Bharat is very much a doable objective, but it is not a done deal. To make it a done deal, you have to do all these things.
The Saraswati, the Durga, the Lakshmi all have to
One
be
part
within
of it,
one room.
all this. See, nation building is a huge enterprise. It is beyond podcasts like this. It is a huge enterprise. And we must also be conscious of the fact that nations become truly great once in centuries. There have been many pretenders. Japan was a pretender. Germany was a pretender. Look at, interestingly, today, this fight between USA and China. The Americans have woken up to the China reality. A little late, but they have woken up. Now the question is, will the China story beat US rejuvenation? ये सो रहा था, जग गया है. But this is a very powerful USA. When it wakes up, it does wonders. Look at what the B-2 strike has shown. It's the only military in the world which can take off from USA and bomb the hell out of any country anywhere. What does it do to your national sovereignty and integrity and all that?
Completely undetected.
Who has taken note? China has taken note. Russia has taken note. But yay bombers can fly towards Taiwan. So it has to be a complex. Would such proficiencies have come without technology, without talent, without wealth? So nation building is a huge enterprise. And nations becoming great is an even bigger enterprise, because despite what you do, you also have to get lucky. So it is a huge thing. And as I said, Viksit Bharat is very much in your grasp, but it is not a done deal.
So thanks a lot. I mean, but one thing is very clear that, we need to set our house in order. We need to develop, and then our problems will be sorted. Problems will be sorted, or they'll be far less than what they are. It's like fortune favors the brave. So totally agree with you that, be it culturally, strategically, execution, we need to bring all the three goddesses in the same room, make them talk to each other, and then help in terms of building up the nation. And once we have all the muscle power and economic power, adversaries will always be subdued automatically. So thanks a lot, sir, for coming in and sharing your insight, because a lot of these points and thinking that you shared gives a lot of homework for me to do for the next time I meet you. But till then, thanks a lot. And
And if I may leave you with one last thought, you
Sure.
and your viewers, that I was reading somewhere, Vidya is not merely about knowledge. So Vidya is about clarity. We know so much, but clarity will tell you what is that amongst that so much you know that you push to act. So we also in a national sense need clarity. कि भाई इतनी चीज़ें हैं जो करनी है, इतनी चीज़ें हो सकती हैं, तवज्जो किस पे दी जाए. That clarity,
prioritization is very, very important.
clarity is a quality which separates the men from the boys, nations from the pretenders. So that's another thought which came to my mind. It is just not merely about knowing, it's about knowing what to prioritize when. For example, today, if we are in a national security phase of geopolitics, which to me, it's look at the missiles flying all over the world, should we shift focus? Should we shift focus briefly? Priority, and then get it back. But if we don't shift focus or shift lazily, then we'll create. So agility, clarity, these are also
Speed to execution is
Yes.
very, very important.
These are also issues that need to be resolved.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. And just a request to the audience. Please do share your feedback in the comment section. Do subscribe or like to the channel. And do let me know what else we could have asked, sir. now and perhaps in the future. And till then, keep watching. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mas. Thanks a lot.